All right, so what is BlockStart? We are a European funded project to help SMEs, so small, medium enterprises in agri-food, healthcare, and logistics to overcome the challenges to implement blockchain, these new solutions and technologies that you might have heard about, in order to stimulate development and innovation to help those companies. It is a free training program to help increase your awareness, and there's also funding involved to help implement your solutions. So why blockchains for small medium enterprises? So we have there's a huge potential in this technology. It can reduce cost, it can improve your business model. It has all kinds of benefits that we will go into a little bit later as well. But there's a lot of problems with trying to innovate for small medium enterprises due to the fact that the supply chains have been very brittle so far, and there's not enough room, especially monetarily and time, to try and innovate. And this is why we're here to help you. A lot of SMEs are not aware of this technology, and that is so pervasive in the supply chain. We're really talking about a game changer here that is probably to revolutionize the entire supply chain globally in the next 5 to 10 years. And not getting on board, not knowing what is to come, can be a real competitive danger to small medium enterprises, and this is why the European Union has now stepped in to try and stimulate development in that side as well. We are a consortium of different partners. So if you join this program, then you should know that we have a lot of experts on board. We have a lot of different sites on board. A lot of people in this sphere of partners are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. So we can really build a diverse understanding of the technology for you, and we can really tailor-make the programs for you. So now, what about me and what about my esteemed colleague Geoff? So my name is Christian Verhoef. I am from the University of Applied Sciences, Windesheim in Zwolle. I am a little bit of a technology geek, and I have a poultry background, which makes me relate to both food and the new technology. So I understand your struggles. And I have my esteemed colleague Geoff from Chainpoint, who will explain to you the fundamentals of the technology, and I will now give it over to him so that he may further introduce himself. Geoff.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm Jeff Taylor from Chainpoint. I'm one of the key software engineers at Chainpoint, and so today I will be explaining at quite a sort of light-hearted level blockchain technology. It won't be too technical. I'll try and align it to the business added value as well, but hopefully you will get a good insight into what blockchain technology is and why it's different. Basically, in every supply chain, you have a number of streams. You have, for example, a physical goods stream in the supply chain. There's a financial stream. There's invoicing going on, payments, and whatever. And there's also the information stream as well, which is that basically the reality that in many supply chains at different positions along the supply chain, information is stored. It's stored in all kinds of various formats: paper, Excel, databases. But one of the key things that we often see in supply chains is that information isn't really integrated. I'll touch on that in a moment because blockchain can add value to that. And there's also the sense of ownership in a blockchain as well. So ownership of data that you deliver in a supply chain and potentially into the blockchain as well. So think of, for example, a receipt of a delivery, and that you can prove that you are the owner of that receipt and that you are the originator of that delivery. So in terms of financial stream, blockchain has potential. One of the most common things that we always hear about blockchain technology is the relationship with things like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is probably the most well-known implementation of blockchain, and there's certainly scope within supply chains, certainly in the future, to be implementing financial transactions among each other when your partners are all together on the blockchain. all of that information that I talked about at separate positions or separate stages in the supply chain as well. Well, blockchain has the potential to gather all of that information as well, and I'll give some more concrete examples of that in just a few moments. And in terms of ownership of data, proving that data is yours, and also the aspect of securing your ownership of data. In other words, making data available to other stakeholders in your supply chain where desirable, but also safeguarding it from access where desirable as well. Blockchain can also play an important role there. So in terms of the financial stream, the information stream, and ownership, blockchain gives us the potential in a supply chain to integrate all of that into one platform that we can share. So instead of having a world where you have all these separate IT systems under separate ownership, you have one integrated platform, so you don't need to export data in and out between systems for each other. You don't need to reconcile data because you're all on one platform. That's the whole point of blockchain. And because of that, because it's integrated, it also comes with a complete audit trail for all activities that can take place on the supply chain. So blockchain itself, there are a few elements of blockchain which I think are particularly interesting to supply chains. Firstly, security. You see, one of the key characteristics of a blockchain is the idea of immutability. A bit of a complicated name, but what it fundamentally means is that any information that's added into the blockchain cannot be changed once it's in there. So you can't go back to data from like a few hours ago or a few days ago and change that data. You can only add data to the blockchain. Why is it important? For data integrity. It stops people making a claim right now about certain data, and then going back tomorrow and changing the claim that they made with that data. And a claim could be anything like a shipment or a transaction, like the amount of kilos of material that was shipped, for example. In a blockchain, you can't go back and change that, which adds to data integrity. The blockchain also means that all stakeholders on the chain are on the same single database system. I'll explain that in a bit more detail in a moment. But due to that fact, it means that there's a real opportunity for transparency within the supply chain as well. Keep in mind, with transparency, I always like to talk about it more as controlled transparency. You shouldn't have the idea that just because all stakeholders are on the supply chain or on the blockchain, that they can necessarily see every aspect of each other's data. There are ways of controlling that transparency on the blockchain. And probably the most important thing, that a blockchain database is not one single database. It is multiple copies of the same database which are distributed to the various stakeholders in the supply chain, which means that you are all operating on the same single record of truth, which is a very key characteristic of blockchain. So how does it look? Well, very simplified here. When data gets added to the blockchain, and I will remind us, it can only be added, it can't be later removed, it can't later be changed, it can only be added. You have a sort of container in this blockchain, and that's called a block. So we can put bits of data into that block. When the block is full, a new block gets created, and there is a link made between the previous block and the new block that's created. There is a digital link made in the blockchain. So those two blocks are tied together. And they're tied together with a special calculation, which is based on the contents of the block. And it's exactly that mechanism with this link between the blocks, it's called a hash, that guarantees that you can't go back and change data, because that calculation is made only once at the point that the new block is created. So we have this calculation made here, which is the relationship between the first block that we see and the second block. Imagine if I could retrospectively go back in time and change that data in that first block. The blockchain would detect that, because the calculation that was made originally no longer matches, because the data in that block doesn't match that calculation that was originally made. And that's the basic mechanism, at least at a theoretical level, for ensuring that data cannot retrospectively be tampered with. So data can't be removed, and it keeps a high level of integrity in the blockchain. And so traditionally, in in IT systems that have been used, for example, for supply chains, you at any one step in the supply chain, you might have an IT system which has a record of certain companies that you deal with, users. Maybe you've even gone as far as digitizing some documents in that IT system, and maybe you've also got some traceability or chain of custody information as well. But the fact remains that would be then one IT system at some position along the supply chain, which operates actually as a sort of silo of information in the supply chain. And with blockchain, we take this idea of being able to have a database, but instead of it being just one centralized thing for one party, it's a little bit like this, I suppose. Each of the key stakeholders in the supply chain has their own copy of the database. That's the idea of a decentralized database. All of the copies of the databases are synchronized with each other. So every stakeholder that's got their own copy of the blockchain database has a complete up-to-date record of everything that happens in the blockchain as a whole. So you're all on the same data. So it's a single record of data. It's one single record of the truth. That's the whole point about blockchain, that you're all operating on the same database, even though you've got your own local copies of that data. Which means that it's a shared system of data among partners. So the blockchain is an ideal system for collaborating among partners. And also, one of the potentials of blockchain is that you could cut out quite a lot of overlapping IT. So what I mean is, if you had a supply chain with a lot of these separate IT systems operating as silos, most likely exporting bits of data to each other, importing bits of data from each other, reconciling data with each other. I suppose one of the advantages of blockchain is, wouldn't it just be simpler if we were just all on the same system here, the same record of data? It would cut out all of that overlapping IT overhead of exchanging data between separate systems, and you wouldn't have that problem of data silos. So that's really the promise with a decentralized blockchain. So if we look at a more detailed example here, when you have these separate silos of IT systems, and when you still have some concept of a sort of partnership between stakeholders in the supply chain. So imagine A, B, and C are all partners in the supply chain, but they're not on the blockchain here. So what they rely on doing is, with their own separate data systems, partner A frequently exports data about the sales of materials to partner B. Partner B can import that data, and partner B can also export data about certain, maybe, for example, sustainability claims that they're making to partner C, if partner C is something like a standards organization, for example, which reviews certain claims that are made. The problem with this is, because these are all separate IT systems that have the freedom to export whatever they like, you can see the situation here that partner A has claimed that he sold 1,500 kilograms of material, but partner B is actually claiming that he bought 3,500 kilograms of material. And because partner C is totally reliant on what is reported by partner B, and also partner C cannot see what partner A has actually been claiming in terms of materials that are sold, you see that there's the chance here for data to be wrongly presented because it's not integrated. With blockchain, it's radically different. You have more this situation, which reminds us maybe of the slide that I just previously showed, where on a blockchain, we're all on the same IT system. We're all on the same single system of data, the same single source of truth, which means now that party C, for example, absolutely has the ability, if the transparency is set up this way, to vet what partner A originally claimed in terms of materials that were sold. So it gives you more that sort of potentially holistic view over the data from all partners, which brings a lot more integrity to the processes, and it makes it a lot harder, for example, to introduce things like fraud into that information stream. So there are also a number of opportunities then based on the blockchain technology examples that we've seen, which are quite high level at the moment, to keep it simple. So supply chain collaboration is certainly one of the benefits that that blockchain technology can bring, because you are integrated all onto that same IT system, that same system of record. There's really the ability to be streamlining and even automating processes such as, for example, orders, deliveries, payments. It can bring more efficiency, it can lower costs because of that collaboration. At the same time, there's the idea of securing the supply chain. There's the real opportunity to have digital documentation placed onto the blockchain where it can be more widely available, and it can't be tampered with. It cannot be tampered with because it's immutable. You can't go back in time and go changing that documentation. It's ideally suited for chain of custody data for traceability, for example, and perhaps one of the holy grails is the combination of chain of custody data with documentation that would support certification, for example, so that producers of certain goods would have confidence in knowing that the digital certification is tied to the chain of custody, and that that data is has strong integrity and hasn't been tampered with. Now, when you've got that kind of chain of custody and certification in place, it can bring real benefits for concepts such as brand protection. You know, for example, it's one thing to claim that your textile goods, for example, are made of a certain percentage of sustainable materials, but can you actually prove it? Do you have the system of record in place to prove that, and can you tie that up to the certification in a way which is irrefutable, in a way where you know it's not being tampered with? That's what blockchain can offer. It can offer traceability, and it can offer degrees of transparency as well. Because in many supply chains now, we're still dealing with complexity. You know, supply chains are global. Supply chains are increasingly driven by customer demands. Customers are increasingly requesting that the goods that are produced by a supply chain are ethically produced. They are sustainably produced, and the customer is a very strong driver in all of this. And I do get the feeling that you know, that those kind of demands that are made by customers ripple eventually down to legislation and regulations. So, to give one example, there is some talk. I believe that the European Union will be at least discussing or probably implementing some new laws in 2021, forcing supply chains to be absolutely aware of the sort of human conditions in their supply chains. More the ethical side of things, and that they will have a real responsibility to know that their supply chains are free of things like, for example, forced labor, bonded labor, those kind of things. There's the opportunity for data sharing, and there's the demand for data sharing as well. That is something that becomes increasingly complex in supply chains as they grow bigger and bigger. And we're dealing with an ever-changing world. I think, to be fair, one of the very rapid changes we've seen this year, of course, is the impact of coronavirus. I think it's fair to say that some supply chains have found out to their detriment and to their cost that by not having the tiers of your supply chain more fully mapped out, all of a sudden you are realizing that you are dependent on supplies quite deep in the supply chain that you probably never even realized. You probably never even realized where they were sourced from. You probably never realized that you probably should be proactively looking at that kind of picture, where you can mitigate things, where are the gaps in your supply chain in terms of mitigation. And we've seen this year that suddenly the world can become very, very different. And to be frank, quite a lot of supply chains were caught out. Sustainability is also something that supply chains increasingly need to deal with, ties in very much with regulation and customer demand, but also ties in with the very simple principle that it's to a supply chain's benefit to make sure that they've got materials not just for today, but also for tomorrow as well. So that all ties in with sustainability. To give some examples, there are some examples of systems already running on blockchain, even though it's a reasonably new and novel technology. It is an emerging technology. IBM's Food Trust is something that's been running for quite a while now. Food Trust allows multiple stakeholders to come on board onto the same system of record. That gives the advantage of transparency. It allows food quality to be better controlled, for example. And there's also the aspect of location tracking as well in the chain. There are systems that are already delivering paperless documentation, which can rapidly transform and lead to more efficiency in transportation in the supply chain itself. It's about making the whole process much more efficient, because if you've got certain documentation that you can pass on then to the next shipment partner, for example, and that's all immediately electronically presented because you're all on the same blockchain system, there's definitely an efficiency win to be made there. Track and trace, I touched upon that a little bit earlier, the idea being that if you've got your chain of custody mapped out, and it does depend on the chain of custody model that you would deploy, but imagine if you had, for example, a form of batch level traceability deployed in your chain of custody on the blockchain, then there are possibilities to do things like track and trace. It's one of the things that Chainpoint is sometimes involved in. The idea that if there was an anomaly detected more upstream in the supply chain at a later moment in time, you can trace back downstream to see what final products or materials midstream have been affected by that upstream anomaly. And trade and finance is also one of the examples that's already running on the blockchain, which will continue to emerge. I think it will, I'll be honest, I think it will still take some time before digital currencies on the blockchain solidify and really find their way, but it is emerging. There are some systems that are allowing trading to take place with digital currencies. Which brings us to perhaps one of the final concepts that I'm going to talk about, which is the idea of supply chain 4, which is really about more full-blown digitization and automation of the supply chain. It ties in very much to this concept that some of us might have heard about, which is IoT, Internet of Things. The idea being that, sensors will be deployed wherever they possibly can to be delivering data everywhere that they possibly can be, which will lead to a massive frequency of data that has to be collected, but it also leads to a massive wealth of information that we can monitor on a level that's never been possible before. That information that's being collected can tie into automation of processes, which is also very much a concept of supply chain 4. And the idea that if you've got that wealth of information, you can analyze it in a more end-to-end or holistic way. And as we know, if you've got all partners on the blockchain, that is by its very definition a more holistic approach to managing data, because you're on that same system of record. And so it turns out that blockchain is really very ideally positioned to be the backbone of this revolution, this next generation in supply chains. It's very ideally suited for that. To finish off here, summing up, what is it? It's a decentralized and immutable storage of verified transaction data. In one sentence, that's really what blockchain is. We've seen that it's decentralized. We've seen that how immutability can lead to much better integrity of data, and that data is also verified in the blockchain, and it cannot be tampered with, which moves me over to my colleague Chris. If you would take over from here, Chris, and thanks everyone for listening to my part of the webinar.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so welcome everybody. Glad that you're still all here. Hope that you understood most of the information that was just given to you. If you still are unsure of what this is, don't worry, that's what this training program is about, right? So what you're looking at right now is the Gartner hype cycle. Gartner is a technology company that predicts how prevalent software and new technologies are. And what this line represent is that at the beginning of a new technology, the technology is always overestimated and overvalued. Which is the peak of inflated expectations, which is this bubble that you see. We have seen this trend in many technologies that have been around for a long time now. It follows the same hype cycle, for example, that the internet did. So as people realize that the technology is not mature yet, you reach the peak of inflated expectations. People realize that it's not up to the challenge yet, and as a result, confidence collapses. Which happens with every technology. However, with regards to blockchain, we are now this is from 2019. In 2020, the blockchain technology now has really gone through the of disillusionment, which basically means the technology has proven itself and is now gaining traction. What we can also see is that the coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, has increased the rate of adoption in new technologies. Specifically to what my colleagues already said, the supply chain has taken significant hits in this epidemic, and as a result, the suppliers know that they need to change, and the governments need to know that they need to change, and as a result, the adoption has increased. So we also see a lot of new programs, specifically in blockchain, but also other connecting technologies taking hold in the entire industry right now. So you're in the correct position to join this program to get a heads up. What we can see is that if the technology is now on the top of the hype cycle right now, it takes about 5 to 10 years to be fully integrated into the chain, into the technology. That said, let's continue. Simply said, we have a lot of different views on how this technology is prevalent in the entire sector. And at the moment, if you have one of these problems, so aka logistic finance process integration, is that your main struggle point, let's put it that way. If you have main struggles with track and trace, if you have main struggles with material passports, which means that a digital copy of your product is moved along with your product as it moves through the entire chain, that's a material passport. Paper-based processes, if you have too much difficulties with duplicate paperwork, and authority-based systems where you have to have a single signature through your entire warehouse, for example, or conditioned goods where you're unsure if the products that you are receiving have been treated as per agreement. Say, for example, if you're carrying potatoes, that the container that they have been moved in is not too hot, and as a result, the potatoes are not already prematurely becoming plants. Regarding track and trace, and you will receive the PowerPoint afterwards so that you can discuss it with your fellow colleagues and really be a champion of this technology within your own industry. I highly recommend that you do that. So at the moment, what we see in the industry is that the blockchain specifically for track and trace is ready to be adopted. There are many applications out there right now with blockchain support that are focusing on this specific use case, and as a result, it's already becoming common knowledge and common practice in some companies to implement this technology. So the readiness is quite high. The disruption level is also quite high, as the ability to be able to know where goods are at any specific time, the amount of inventory that is needed or is available, and the way that the goods move throughout the supply chain is also considered the holy grail of logistics. If you know all this information, you know exactly how much you need to produce, how much factory output you need to have, how much workers you need to have, how much products you need to grow next season, for example. So it's also considered the holy grail. This is why it's so broadly adopted as well, because it's a quick win and it's a very invasive, very disruptive win for the entire industry. And what we also see, and that's of course a major concern, is that people lose their competitive edge or their competitive position because they are effectively a middleman, and that is true. By implementing these types of technologies, you do risk that, but what you also gain, and that's the interesting thing, and you will get in this program as well, you will understand or start to understand it, is you will find new business opportunities and new ways of working together that you did not consider or were not possible even in a previous type of system, because for simply you could not innovate without losing your competitive edge, and now you can innovate without losing your competitive edge because you're part of the system. You become a intricate part of the chain, and as a result, you cannot be disrupted when you are in the program as quickly as you would before. So one point of attention that I have to that we have seen in this type of implementations is that as you are connecting different information systems together and they're gathering different types of data, these data types might not be accepted by the other IT systems of other companies. So that the fact that you're attaching to a blockchain doesn't mean that everybody can read that blockchain yet. It means that the information is there for those that can read it, and for those systems that can understand and interact with it. So in the part of IT systems and connecting them together, what we also have seen that is that some applications have to be adapted or rewritten to accommodate these types of systems, these types of new networks, let's say. So what we can see is that at the moment, this is a very interesting technology for this type of applications. So the disruption level is quite high. There has not been the ability before to be able to digitize to such an extent that we can actually verify that nothing went wrong during transport, simply because for the fact that the sensors were not developed enough yet and we could not connect them all together yet. That was the main crux in these systems. And also, as you connect all these systems together, one would point out like, okay, but who controls these systems? Because if you control these systems, you can make them say anything you want. So if I control my own shipment and I control the sensors that monitor my own shipment, and something went wrong, I could change the data on that specific sensor to say that nothing went wrong at all. My products are fine. With these type of systems, because we're connecting everything together, and because the technology, as Geoff said, is add only, so we're adding information, but we cannot remove or retract information, that no longer is a major issue point. So this technology solves that specific problem. However, when we look at this technology as well, what we see right now is that the interaction with blockchain and IoT, because they're both very new technologies, it's still a struggle point, and it's still something that we're experimenting with right now. So getting on this specific use cases and stuff like that means that you become an industry leader. You become one of the first to actually implement it. I hope that kind of gave you an attention. So an additional point of attention is the same with track and trace, as you're connecting different sensors from all over the world, interlacing with different systems as well. Say, for example, you have a sensor in your container, and you have a sensor as the container goes into the port. That's a different sensor. They could be speaking in a different language, let's say a different computer language. And as a result, how do you make this translation possible? Now, blockchain can connect people to each other, similar to me coming to you and being in your house, for example, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily cannot communicate, because we might not speak the same language. Luckily, English bridges this gap for us right now, but I am Dutch, and if I would speak my language right now, I doubt you would understand me. And similar for these systems. One of the greatest things about this technology that we're also looking at is pre-purchasing, the ability to guarantee automatic financial transactions upon delivery. So if you look at, for example, if you go to paper-based products, if we are looking at that kind of transaction, so if I order a crate of potatoes at your shop, you have to deliver that to me, and traditionally speaking, I pay you as soon as I have delivered the goods. That's traditional, and I even have a payment window for that. So maybe 30 days, maybe 90 days. That means that you have, if you plant potatoes, it takes 3 months to produce the potatoes, then you have to ship them to me, and then I have an additional 3 months to pay that, which means there could be a 6-month gap window from you investing in your own product and me actually paying you. And that's the reality of the world. However, what we can see with blockchain is that we can integrate programs in such a way that I prepay. I say to you, okay, plant the potatoes now, and if you actually successfully deliver to me in 3 months, the money is not returned to me. So AKA the money stays with you. But we basically put it in a holding status to say that as soon as you have delivered to me, as soon as you have delivered to my sensor, pretty much, if you connect to it, it says beep, yes, these are potatoes, correctly processed, correctly documented, correctly, etc. Then automatically the payment is released, as it were, and given to you. Let's talk a little bit more about practical use cases. This is a cool concept. This is Unity. So they have created a mobile planning app for farmers with simple icons. You can see them in the center. So this is made for people that are that can't even read or write, or that can't read or write. They're farmers. They have to just go through the program with the icons. And what they have done, this corporation called Unity has implemented this technology with farmers in Indonesia, in India, and in New Zealand and Australia, and they're also expanding in Kenya. And this is the first leg operation. So this is really farmers to distributor, just a couple of steps, not all the way to the retailer. But what they have done is they've given the ability to farmers to see how other farmers are doing, to plant the crops more effectively, to see where their products are going, to transfer goods through the application itself, so that they don't need to physically handle money anymore, and to be able to pre-purchase in the future. What I find very cool about this is that normally in these types of systems, you pay for the app. You pay for every transaction. That's considered normal. But what they have done, and this is what these types of technologies enable, is that they've given the platform absolutely free. The app is free, the transfers are free, all the goods transfers are all free. And you might then say, okay, so what's the catch? How do they make money? Because if they don't make money, uh, it opens up the window of like, okay, all kinds of dark deals. Are they selling data maybe, or stuff like that? But they're not doing that. The only way that they make money is that they sell products on their platform that the farmer did not have access to before. So they sell tractors, they sell solar panels, they sell different goods to farm better, and these they get a small commission based on that, and that's how they fund their program. So the entire goods flow is free, and they only add to more business to the existing chain, or they are allowing farmers to share their tractor, for example, with the app, and they take a small fee based on that as well, for example. So that's a cool new way of thinking. Not a cool way of thinking if we continue, because there's many more. All right, so I am Dutch. I have Dutch companies as examples. I'm sorry. So Philips is a giant electronics company in the Netherlands and across the world, actually. And what they've implemented blockchain. Not many people know this, but they have implemented blockchain to handle financial transactions. So Philips is distributed around the world. They have a lot of different companies that they have purchased, and as a result, they need to integrate all these different companies. They do this, of course, if they have to procure a product, they order it from all their different smaller products, and they pay in their own currency. Say, for example, if they have a product in South Africa, that they pay in their currency. If they have one in Morocco, they pay in their currency, and if they want in the Netherlands, they pay in their currency. Now, to get all the products to the same place, and then in one good to be sold to the customer. The problem here is they pay fees, of course, as they have to transfer the currency in all kinds of different currencies. Again, this costs Philips a lot of money. So what they did is they implemented blockchain for only that reason, so they didn't have to have their own fee structure within their company. They have now created their own financial system within their entire company to be able to purchase throughout the organization, so that it's still a reward-based system where it's efficient. But they don't need to pay the transaction fees as goods move across borders, and with trying to change the different kinds of currency. Now, that's one implementation. Then we have Albert Heijn. Albert Heijn is a major food supplier, well, also in the US, so you know what I'm talking about. And what they have done, they have implemented the blockchain, and this was mainly focused on their warehouse, not even on the products themselves, but on their warehouses. And what they did is they had a lot of paper processes. As the goods went into the warehouse, they had paperwork that then had to be checked 3 times by three different departments across the entire building, which means that a truck driver would have to walk all across the entire distribution center just to have his paperwork checked. And that's okay, but that also means that cost a lot of time, that cost a lot of frustration, mistakes were made, and stuff like that. So what they've done, they've implemented the blockchain solution, so that now that they sign on their mobile, and as it's signed, it gets prompted as a notification at the other department, which then signs, another department, which then signs, and then another department, which then signs. And the truck driver never needs to leave their station, and they can just basically deal with paperwork that way. And as a result, they cut 20 minutes off their transfer time. Well, 20 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but if you multiply that 1,000 times, that's a lot of time, and AK time is money, so that's a lot of cost that they have saved. Besides from that, everybody's looking at the same information, so people immediately know where things went wrong, people know what kind of cargo they're looking at, people know what has to be done to that cargo, so there's a lot less confusion in that side. And there's a cool movie on YouTube about it. You should totally watch it. It's to see their experience. All right, so I would like to really invite you to join our program. It's free. And you might ask, what's the catch on this? Well, the European Union is supplying this. So what we have seen right now is that there are many types of people that implement this technology. At the moment, it is either the supplier or the retailer that implements this. But the question is, what happens to the guys in the center? What happens to the distributor? And so if you're that's why we're here. We're trying to also help them help the center innovate to make sure that they do not become irrelevant. So it's either very big companies like Philips that are implementing this technology, or it's the first leg of this of the chain that is implementing this. And we're the European Union, and of course we are also worried about what happens to the smaller companies and what happens to the companies in the center. So this program is well, we are catering to every part in the chain, but we really want to look after the center part of this chain, and this is why we're here. So the European Union has your back. That's why we're here, right? We're here to help you. All right, so how do you apply? You go to the website, you fill in the program. We will help you try to complete it correctly, and then we will review your application. I would like to thank everybody very much for joining this application. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. I hope to see you soon in that program. You also feel free to contact, of course, us through LinkedIn or email us.
Yes, thanks very much, Chris. Thanks everyone for joining